3:04 a.m. The lights above me hummed with that cold clinical tone only hospitals seem to master, and the beeping from the IV pump pulsed slow and steady like a metronome, reminding me I was still here. Womack Army Medical Center, Fort Liberty. Not a battlefield, not a convoy route, not a checkpoint along a dusty road overseas. Yet my body registered threat the same way. Breathing steady eyes tracking muscles quiet but ready. Second-degree burns, the doctor had said. Hot liquid exposure. They avoided the word assault at first cautious professional, but I saw it in the shift of their eyes when they asked how it happened. Family dinner, I answered. That was enough to pull a nurse's eyebrows together, enough to make a resident murmur something to another about domestic reports. I stared at the ceiling and counted breaths. In through the nose for 4 hold, for 4, out for 4. Combat training worked in fluorescent rooms just as well as desert heat. I could still feel the scalding heat on my skin, the shock as the coffee hit the sting, spreading like a warning flare across my collarbone and shoulder. I smelled it again, bitter roast sugary cream, the scent rising with the steam as if it were proud to announce what had happened. Madison's voice echoing 15 minutes. Leave this family. As if she had the authority to dictate my existence the way a commander dictates a mission timeline. As if blood gave her ownership. She smiled when she did it. Not wide, not theatrical. Just a satisfied, tight curve of the lips, like she had finally claimed something she believed she deserved. My parents did not gasp. They did not rush forward. They watched. Then they nodded. That was what replayed more than the burn. Their silence first. Then their approval. That was the true heat. I blinked slowly and the memory dissolved into the ceiling again. There were footsteps outside the curtain. A nurse adjusting my drip line. She looked at me with that practiced calm the medical world wears like armor. Ma'am, your vitals are steady. Pain management is active. You are safe here. Safe. Safety is a word civilians trust easily. Soldiers measure it. I had measured it in places where dust storms carried metal scent and radio static meant decision in seconds. I had stood in briefing rooms in Kandahar, paced security corridors, and Baghdad driven patrol routes with eyes scanning for anything off pattern. I had come home in one piece twice. And yet here, burned by coffee in a restaurant in Wilmington, North Carolina, surrounded by soft lighting and birthday decorations and linen tablecloths, I had been wounded by people who shared my last name. 2 deployments had taught me composure. They had not prepared me for applause after humiliation. I closed my eyes and the sound returned. Not loud clapping, no cheers. Just polite tapping the kind given after a church solo or a school recital. My aunt dabbed her eyes, not in concern, but in admiration for the theatrics. My father leaned back, arms folded proud of the moment as if discipline were being enforced. My mother's hand rested on Madison's shoulder like she had earned a medal. I stood there, coffee-dripping skin burning the scent everywhere, and I did not raise my voice. I simply said, "Is that the timer?" Calm. Controlled. The same tone I used when briefing junior MPs on protocol or addressing a heated situation on base. Tactical calm is not surrender. It is setup. Pain is not signal to retreat. It is information. The curtain rustled and the doctor stepped in. "Captain Grant, we are sending documentation to post." They asked if an MP unit should be notified. I nodded once. The doctor hesitated, then lowered his voice. "This should never happen in a home." I met his gaze. "I do not have a home there. Home is where discipline holds, where integrity is oxygen, where loyalty means showing up. Blood alone never made a home." My mind flicked through memory like slow-motion footage. Madison as a child praised for pirouettes. Me cleaning up after bake sales. Her birthday parties with rented ponies. My departures met with tight smiles and quick goodbyes like service was an inconvenience, not honor. Their expectations had always been simple. Be quiet, be useful, be less. I had obeyed only the first 2 until the day I signed enlistment papers and walked into Fort Jackson with no backup but my own spine. The IV beeped again, drawing me back. My skin ached, but my voice stayed steady when I finally asked, "When can I be discharged?" The nurse looked surprised. "You need rest." I gave her a faint smile. "I will rest. After I finish something." My phone vibrated on the tray. Messages from my unit, from Sergeant Cole Ramirez. Heard what happened. Standing by. No judgment in that sentence. No pity, just readiness. Soldiers know betrayal when they see it. They also know response is best executed cold-measured lawful. I was not going to shout. I was not going to strike back with chaos. I had built my life on structure, on discipline, on consequences earned and delivered with clarity. They gave me 15 minutes to leave the family. I gave them a lifetime to regret it. If you have ever felt betrayal from the people who were supposed to protect you, tell me where you are watching from. 3 days. That was the length of the pass I signed for at Fort Liberty, a neat scribble on a form acknowledging temporary freedom. Though freedom is a strange word when it sends you back to the place that once felt like duty more than love. I loaded my duffel into the trunk of my government sedan just after sunrise, the air cool and the sky washed in that pale Carolina blue that promises warmth later but offers none now. The highway between Fayetteville and Wilmington had always been familiar, each mile marker a quiet metronome counting down not to rest, but to something heavier. On base, everything is order. Chain of command, directives, respect earned and exchanged like currency. Off base back in my hometown, respect was optional and rarely directed toward me. The drive took just over an hour and a half, enough time for my thoughts to move through memories like a convoy line, steady and unblinking. I passed pines bowing in the winter wind, old farm stands closed for the season, and exit signs leading to towns where church bells and porch lights marked the rhythm of life. I kept my breathing measured, hands relaxed on the wheel. Arrival did not need tension. Tension would greet me on its own. Wilmington welcomed with its usual charm the Cape Fear River gleaming under morning light, boats rocking gently at the docks, and brick-lined sidewalks that whispered history and Southern grace. People come here to feel calm. I came here because obligation has a stubborn hold. My parents' house sat in a quiet neighborhood near the water-white siding and black shutters, the same hydrangea bushes still crowding the walkway like they had for decades. I parked at the curb rather than the driveway, always leaving myself an open exit. The discipline of a soldier does not fade when the uniform is in the garment bag beside me. My hand paused on the door handle for a breath. Not fear, calculation. I stepped out, smoothed my jacket, and walked toward the porch. The door opened before I knocked, as if they had been standing just on the other side, waiting to catch the first sight of me. My mother's smile flickered like a candle in a draught, polite, but strained, the kind worn by someone greeting a visitor rather than welcoming family. "Avery," she said, voice sweet but thin. "You made it." I gave a small nod. "I said I would." My father appeared behind her, posture rigid, assessing me the way civilians sometimes do when they want to appear proud but do not quite know the language. He nodded once. "Captain." He always used my rank as if respect were a formality rather than connection. Madison entered the hallway with the timing of someone who believed spotlights followed her. 32 hair curled in loose waves make up perfect even at home, a soft sweater draped like she had walked out of a catalog. She smiled wide, the kind that showed teeth but not sincerity. "Look who came back to grace us," she said, stepping forward to kiss the air beside my cheek. I returned her look with calm neutrality. "Good to see you too, Madison." Her eyes flicked down my outfit, not the uniform, but still structured, still precise. She hummed like she had caught a flaw in my armor. "You are always so serious. Must be exhausting." I let the comment pass. "You look well," I said simply. Compliments do not need warmth to be polite. We moved into the living room where the familiar furniture sat like monuments to a past that valued appearance over comfort. The walls still held framed photos of Madison in pageants, school dance dresses, graduation smiles. My images were there too, but smaller, tucked into corners, group shots from ceremonies where I stood in uniform among peers rather than center stage alone. My mother fussed with a tray of coffee and pastries, her movements practiced. "You must be tired from traveling," she said. "Always working, always busy." I shrugged lightly. Duty does not schedule itself. Madison perched on the couch like a queen on a throne. "Still single. Avery. Are there no nice army men left? Or is it just that difficult to match your standards? Her laugh floated like perfume light but sharp. I breathed once quietly. I prefer stability and honor over convenience, I replied. Some things are chosen later in life on purpose. My father cleared his throat, the sound meant to shift the air. You never stay long. We barely see you. You always have somewhere else to be. I held his gaze. Duty demands presence where it matters. Silence settled thick, but not unfamiliar. The unspoken sentiment hovered presence at home, never counted, only sacrifice did, and even then not enough to outweigh Madison's need for admiration. My mother finally broke the quiet, offering a plate. Eat something. You look thinner. Stress will do that. Deployment discipline will do that, I thought, but I simply took a piece of toast. Routine helps. We sat in orchestrated politeness, the kind where everyone knows the choreography but no one enjoys the dance. Madison leaned back, eyes glimmering. You are coming tonight, right, Mothers? Birthday dinner at the Riverwalk. It will be perfect. I nodded once. I already said I would. Her grin sharpened. Good. Do not disappear before the celebration. People want to see you. Translation: people want to see the soldier sister, not because they appreciate her, but because admiration by proximity is convenient. The room felt tight, not from walls, but expectation. Yet I did not flinch. Calm is my language. Control is my posture. If you have ever been the outsider in your own family, you will understand. Childhood is supposed to feel soft around the edges, wrapped in warmth and gentle praise, something you carry with you like a quilt tucked into memory. Mine felt orderly, measured, like standing at attention in a house where applause always traveled in one direction. Our home in Wilmington was pastel and polite from the outside, all trimmed hedges and porch flags, the kind neighbors pointed to when they talked about family pride. Inside, pride settled almost exclusively on Madison. She danced. That was the headline. Every week there were Lessons glittery shoes music that floated through the living room while she practiced spins and stretches. My mother clapped at every attempt even when she stumbled. Look how graceful she is. Such natural poise. I sat at the dining table doing homework, my math worksheets neatly completed, pencils aligned. If I earned a perfect score, the response was efficient. Good. Keep it up. No celebration. The attention was a spotlight turned in one direction, everyone else just holding the wiring to make it shine brighter. I did not resent her then. I simply observed. As a child, you assume adults distribute attention with wisdom. When you receive less, you convince yourself it is because you require less. Strength is praised only when it serves others. On Saturday mornings, while Madison slept late after Friday night rehearsals, I cleaned the kitchen and swept the porch because my mother liked the house to look polished when her friends visited. Avery helped me, she would say, handing me a rag to dust shelves lined with porcelain angels. I did it quietly each time, believing duty earned admiration. My father sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper, nodding at my mother's commentary about Madison's talent. He rarely looked over to see me rinsing plates or tying up trash bags. When he did, the comment was always the same. Madison needs attention, sweetheart. You are strong. As if strength excused absence. As if resilience meant not deserving softness. I learned early that strength in their definition meant invisibility. There was one moment I recall with perfect clarity, like a photograph lit too brightly to fade. I was 10. Madison was 7, and we were both in Girl Scouts at that time. Our troop had set up a cookie stand outside a grocery store, troop vests, neat boxes stacked like colorful bricks. A group of older kids walked by teenage boys who carried that careless confidence youth often inflates. They teased Madison about her bow, tugging at it, laughing when she winced. Something in me tightened. I stepped forward and asked them to leave her alone. Not shouted, not dramatic. Just direct voice low, the way my father spoke to contractors who made mistakes. One laughed and flicked my shoulder, annoyed, not threatened. I stood my ground. The troop leader saw the commotion and pulled us aside. I expected praise for protecting my sister, or at least understanding. Instead, she frowned. Avery, do not start trouble. You should behave like a young lady, not confront people. Madison cried, and without question, the blame shifted to me. My parents were called. I remember sitting in the car on the way home, silence thick Madison sniffing theatrically beside me. My mother turned disappointment etched in her face. You embarrassed her. That was all she said. Madison sniffed again, leaning into my mother's arm. I stared out the window and watched the world blur. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. That was the first time I felt something close to steel settle inside me, not anger, but understanding. In our house, protection was not valued if given by the wrong person. Loyalty earned me discouragement, not gratitude. I swallowed the lesson whole. Over time, I became efficient at disappearing into responsibilities. I did chores without being asked. I maintained straight A's without needing reminders. I mastered being reliable, thinking reliability would eventually earn respect. Birthdays came and went. Madison's were grand with neighborhood children and cake layers stacked like celebration itself. Mine were quiet dinner at home, sometimes a card, sometimes just a mention. People assumed I did not care. The truth was quieter. I noticed every imbalance. I simply stored them like classified information, the kind you learn to secure without bitterness, because bitterness is a weakness, and weakness invites replacement. There were nights I wondered whether something was wrong with me. Was I simply less lovable? Or was love something you earned only by shining bright enough to blind everyone else? I looked in the mirror and did not see a mistake. I saw someone built for steadiness, someone who held lines rather than performed in front of them. But children do not speak their truths when the audience is deaf by choice. So I clapped for her recitals and hung her ribbons on the bulletin board when she asked, even though my own certificates curled in drawers. I cheered when she performed at community festivals, the crowd cooing at her spins and bows while I waited by the folding chairs holding her bag and shoes. Occasionally, a relative would pat my head and say, "You are such a good helper." Helper. Not leader. Not valued. Useful, but not celebrated. Invisible, but indispensable. That was the shape of childhood. Over time, sadness became quiet acceptance, and acceptance settled into something firmer, something like armor. Not the kind made of metal, but the kind made of knowing. When love is conditional, you learn to rely on structure. When praise is selective, you learn to praise yourself in silence. By the time I reached high school, I knew how to stand alone. Independence was not defiance. It was survival. Strength was not taught to me. It was demanded. I did not resent them for shaping me this way. I simply understood that they did not expect me to break. They expected me to hold their world steady while they admired her spinning at center stage. And I did hold. Quiet, steady, unseen. Because sometimes the strongest place to stand is just outside the spotlight, watching, waiting, learning the rhythm of applause that will never be meant for you. If you have ever been praised only when convenient and overlooked when it mattered, you will understand this kind of childhood. At 18, most people imagine dorm rooms and new friends and a version of freedom that still has safety nets underneath. I did not want soft freedom. I wanted structure without favoritism, rules not bent by family whims, respect that did not require applause. I researched enlistment quietly in the library after school in between homework and part-time shifts stacking shelves at the hardware store. While Madison prepared for senior prom fittings and college tours funded by parental pride, I studied chain of command charts and MOS paths. Military police drew me in, not because it sounded glamorous, but because it sounded orderly and firm. Protection by protocol, not personal bias. Justice by training, not opinion. On my 18th birthday, while my parents handed Madison a dress bag for another competition she planned to spectate more than participate in, I drove myself to the recruiting office. Papers were crisp, pen smooth, the signature felt like a steady exhale. The recruiter shook my hand firmly and spoke to me like capability was a given, not a surprise. Report date confirmed. Fort Jackson. Basic in June. I drove home with my future folded in a packet on the passenger seat. Dinner that night tasted like routine. My parents asked about school applications, scholarships, plans for fall. I waited until the plates had been cleared before speaking. I enlisted today. Silence. My mother blinked, first confusion flooding her face before it hardened into disbelief. Enlisted. What do you mean, enlisted? You cannot be serious. My father stared stunned into stillness for a beat, then shook his head like trying to dislodge the idea. Women do not join the Army, Avery. That is not a path for you. You are stronger than that. You do not need to prove anything. Madison's fork clinked softly as she smiled sharp and amused. Mascot soldier, she mumbled, not even whispering, as if uniform meant costume. I sat straight, voice calm. I signed my contract. I shipped to Fort Jackson after graduation. Pride did not warm their features. Fear did not soften them either. Only shock edged with something like insult, as if my choice was betrayal rather than evolution. My mother's voice rose not loud, just tight. You are supposed to go to college. You are supposed to stay close to family. The army is not for you. You are a girl. I held her gaze steady. Service is not assigned by gender. My father stood up pacing, once jaw clenched. You think marching around and barking orders makes you strong? You think you need that kind of life? Why would you choose hard roads when we worked to give you an easier one? I did not raise my voice. I did not defend beyond truth. I chose discipline. I chose purpose. He exhaled sharply, part frustration, part disbelief. Madison leaned back with practiced indifference. Enjoy your little boot camp vacation. Do not forget to send pictures in your cute uniform. I looked at her not with anger, but clarity. Mascots do not earn rank. She rolled her eyes. Whatever. Not everyone needs attention that badly. The irony sat unspoken. I did not pack that night. I did not slam doors or cry into pillows. I went to my room, closed the door gently, and lay on my bed with the enlistment packet resting beside me like a ticket punched in advance. Outside my window, the streetlights glowed across pavement I had walked for years, but it already felt distant, like a postcard from someone else's life. I spent the next few weeks finishing school, showing up to shifts, preparing in silence. My parents adjusted to the decision by ignoring it. Madison capitalized on it, telling friends I wanted to play soldier because I could not handle real college life. I kept my breathing steady. Training started before the uniform ever touched my skin. Graduation day arrived with the same pomp as every other suburban ceremony, but I felt a weightless certainty walking across the stage. Madison posed in every picture like she always did, owning the center. I stood off to the side, tassel straight, posture firm, not needing attention to feel direction. 2 weeks later, we drove to the recruiting office. My parents sat rigid in the front, Madison scrolling on her phone in the back with me, her perfume sharp, her dismissal sharper. At the curb, my mother hugged me quickly, arms light, tone worried not for me, but for the image of a daughter wearing camouflage. My father shook my hand instead of pulling me close. Be careful out there. Do not lose yourself. I looked him in the eye. I am finding myself. Madison smirked, waving lazily. Send photos, soldier girl. I picked up my bag, felt the ground steady under my boots, and did not look back beyond a polite nod. When the bus door closed, a quiet hum filled the air. I sat upright, the seat firm, my future structured. Outside, my old life blurred as distance grew. There was no fear, only breath, only forward. Independence did not feel rebellious. It felt earned, chosen, necessary. When the bus rolled toward Fort Jackson, I knew I was not running from home. I was walking toward one. Kandahar, 2012. The air tasted like dust and heat, the kind that settled in your throat, no matter how much water you drank. Each morning began before sunrise, sky still dark, camp quiet except for generators humming in the background and boots crunching gravel as patrol briefings formed in tight circles. I learned the rhythm fast. Stand straight, eyes forward. Listen to every detail. Lives depend on details. At checkpoints, time stretched. Vehicles lined up, engines rumbling low. Civilians waited, faces tense, but polite fatigue etched into posture and eyes. We checked documents, scanned for anything unusual. A backpack held too tight. A glance that flickered wrong. A sound that should not be there. Discipline was not just a word, it was breath, posture, focus. On the first week, a private fidgeted, shifting weight, adjusting rifle strap, nervous energy vibrating through him. Our sergeant leaned in, voice quiet but sharp. Stillness is safety. Movement invites chaos. I took that lesson into muscle memory. Stillness became armor. My uniform never wrinkled my boots, stayed polished even in sandstorms, and not because appearance mattered, but because discipline does not change when environment does. Control one thing when the world around you shifts. We stood long hours in heat so heavy it pressed against your bones. I tasted sand and my food-wiped grit from my eyelashes felt sweat gather between shoulder blades under Kevlar. But the hardest pressure was not physical, it was vigilance, waiting for what might never come while knowing it could arrive in seconds. And through it all, I found clarity. The chain of command was a straight line. Orders flowed clean. Respect was earned in tone and timing. You did your job, you kept your head, you watched your team's back. I wrote letters home, short ones at first, then longer, told them I was safe, told them I was learning, told them I hoped they were well. I received no replies. Maybe letters got lost. Maybe not. Silence can land harder than any blast. You begin to understand the weight of not hearing your name when mail is called. But numbness is a teacher too. It clears space for resolve. By the end of that year, I knew how to read body language faster than spoken language. I could tell when a civilian approached checkpoint with genuine fear versus practiced hesitation. And I could stand still even when heartbeats ran fast. Honor was not pinned on you. It was practiced daily. When I rotated back stateside and then returned again years later to Baghdad in 2017, I felt older though only 5 years had passed. Baghdad was different. Not less dangerous, but different. More urban, more layered. Convoys wound through neighborhoods where markets opened early and children chased soccer balls through dusty lots. The air held heat and exhaust and something like resilience, stubborn and loud. My role had shifted. I was no longer just following. I was briefing patrols, reviewing routes, making decisions. Responsibility settles like gear. At first it feels heavy, then necessary. You measure success not by medals, but by who comes back through the gate each night. There was a convoy morning where tension crackled like static. Intel suggested possible disruption along our assigned route. We checked vehicles twice, reviewed signals, confirmed medevac protocols. The air felt thick. A junior specialist stepped into formation, voice low, admitting fear. I looked at him and did not dismiss it. Fear acknowledged becomes readiness. Fear ignored becomes noise. I told him what I told myself. You do not move because you do not feel fear. You move because discipline carries you. After we rolled engines, loud, radio quiet, I scanned windows, rooftops, alleys. Every shadow held possibility. The mission concluded with no incident, but the stillness afterward carried its own hum. Relief arrives quietly like breath you did not know you held. Nights on deployment have a different kind of silence layered with memory and exhaustion. Some soldiers let music fill it. Some talk loudly to drown the quiet. I sat often under the camo netting, polishing gear, keeping hands busy but mind sharp. I read training manuals. I cleaned my weapon with precision. I wrote reports. Sometimes I wrote letters again. This time I did not expect replies. Silence became familiar, not friendly, but no longer painful. Hurt fades into numb when repeated enough times. Numbness eventually becomes strength, not coldness, just certainty. I did not check social media much then, but once I did, and I saw Madison smiling in another set of photos, birthday dinners, vacations, her captions bright and perfect. No mention of me. Family portraits taken at holiday events I did not attend because no one told me they existed. It did not sting by then. It simply confirmed what distance had already taught me. I relied on myself. I stood where I was planted. Team, unit, mission, purpose. That was home. Days rotated in rhythm briefing to patrol to debrief meals, eaten fast sleep grasped in segments. When situations escalated, when voices on comms tightened, when decisions pressed fast, I found I had a calm core. Not absence of fear, but control over it. That control became identity. One night after a long patrol, dust streaked across my sleeves, I sat outside the barracks and looked at the stars. They were faint behind city haze, but they were there steady. I breathed slow and realized something simple and profound. I belonged where principles mattered more than performance, where quiet strength outranked loud demands, where people who showed up earned respect, and those who disappeared did not shape my worth. The Army did not make me strong. It revealed strength already there, pressed into me by years of being the steady one in a house full of applause I never earned. Hurt had sharpened. Numb had settled. Strength had formed like steel under heat. When I returned stateside after that deployment, stepping off the plane into humid Carolina air patches, crisper posture firmer, I did not feel triumphant. I felt ready. Ready for whatever life demanded. Ready for whatever silence returned. Ready to stand alone if necessary. Strength was not loud. It did not beg to be seen. It simply existed like the discipline drilled into bone and breath, and I carried that home with me even if home had not carried me. Promotion ceremonies on base do not feel like triumph. They feel like acknowledgement of steady weight carried without dropping it. When I pinned on captain, the applause in the briefing room was polite efficient, earned by hours and decisions and reports written at midnight with precision instead of emotion. My commanding officer shook my hand and said one sentence that stayed with me longer than any ribbon or plaque could. "You are reliable under pressure. In this line of work, that is gold." It was not a grand compliment, but in our world, reliability meant life-preserved protocol, upheld truth, protected. The day I assumed my captain duties in the military police unit, I was assigned oversight of domestic response and security investigations, a symmetry that felt almost poetic. The Army trusted me with situations where peace inside homes on base mattered as much as peace outside the wire overseas. I walked into living rooms where tension sat beneath polite smiles, listened to spouses whose voices trembled with exhaustion, talked soldiers down from pride that had turned brittle. I never raised my voice. I asked questions the way I scanned rooftops once, detecting what did not match the pattern. You learn a lot about people when they stand in their own house and realize uniform or rank does not shield them from consequences. I did not relish authority. I respected it. At community events on base, families waved, children ran past in little boots, and fellow officers nodded to me with that subtle recognition only shared among those who have seen pressure and stayed present anyway. Once, after resolving a report involving a young private who had not been cruel but careless with his partner's trust, he shook my hand as I left and said quietly, "Thank you for not treating me like a problem. You treated me like a person." I did not respond with warmth. I simply nodded. Professional boundaries are not unfeeling. They are respect in structured form. Awards came not with confetti but with formal handshakes and photos in front of subdued backdrops. The Army Commendation Medal I earned was for leadership integrity and calm resolution during multiple high-stress incidents. No cheering sections, no family clapping in the front row. But the recognition mattered because it came from people who measured value by action, not sentiment. Civilian acquaintances, however, reacted differently. On off days in town or at gatherings, people sometimes asked polite questions that slid sideways into dismissal. "You are an MP. That sounds intense, but are you thinking of doing something else eventually? Something softer, something more feminine? Do you ever feel like you missed out choosing such a rigid life?" The implication always hung in the air that discipline somehow diminished womanhood. I let the questions pass like wind, not an enemy, just noise. My work spoke. I did not need to. When I visited home between assignments or training rotations, the same tone echoed in my parents' house, though shaped with more restraint and less awareness. My mother would set the table with her nicest china as though polishing surfaces could erase distance. My father asked about my job, like reciting a script, proud but uncomfortable in ways he could not articulate. He always called me captain, like my rank was safer to acknowledge than the daughter beneath it. They asked questions that felt like they came from someone watching through a window rather than sitting at the same table. "Are you eating enough out there? Are the people kind? Do you ever get tired of being in charge? It is good you are doing something useful, but you know you could still choose something more traditional later if you want." Underneath their tone sat confusion. I had become defined by structure and self-reliance traits they praised in theory but did not recognize in practice when they belonged to a woman who did not ask permission to hold them. Madison remained the center of civilian glow. Photos from charity galas, brunches with friends, summer trips posted with captions about living life fully. When she spoke to me at family dinners, her voice carried polite disengagement, as if she were humoring a relative stationed too far away to be relevant. "You chase badges," she said once, lightly stirring her wine. Like the glass required attention more than I did, and I chase moments. Different priorities. I did not correct her. A life measured does not need validation from one lived in applause and avoidance. There were times I sat at the dinner table in my parents' house posture straight out of habit, listening to them circle conversations about Madison's network, her events, her outfits, her social orbit while I ate quietly knowing real weight existed outside complimentary remarks and curated praise. I did not resent the lack of celebration. By then, I had learned that silence did not break me. It sharpened me. On base, my decisions were trusted. In uniform, I earned deference not because of gender or last name, but because I showed up documented facts, maintained standards, and protected the vulnerable even when they resisted being helped. That kind of work shapes a person. It shapes how you walk, how you see, how you respond when someone raises their voice or tries to provoke you. It builds a core that does not rattle easily. Sometimes on quiet evenings after shift handoff, I walked the perimeter road just inside the fence line. The sky wide above the pine silhouettes headlights flickering from distant highways. Soldiers saluted, and I returned the gesture with steady confidence. Respect was not loud. It lived in the nods, the eye contact the space held without needing to announce itself. My parents never understood that kind of belonging. They wanted softness, or at least the illusion of it, not realizing that strength has its own grace. Madison saw my uniform as costume. I saw it as truth. In those years, the contrast between the world I served and the world I came from sharpened. I belonged where discipline lived, where integrity was currency, where effort was seen. And each time I returned home to polite disinterest and backhanded compliments, I felt the same quiet realization settle deeper. They did not build me. They did not break me. They simply underestimated what I had become. I did not need their applause. The Army did not clap loudly either, but it stood with me, and that was enough. Strength once earned does not require permission. Success exposes insecurity faster than failure ever could. By the time I settled into my captaincy, Madison had long since made a full-time career out of appearing successful without ever standing on solid ground. Her life was curated more than lived, glossy more than grounded. Brunches with women dressed in pastel dresses, champagne flutes raised high. Vacations documented in photos taken more for strangers than memory. Clothing hauls funded by credit cards instead of balance. Wilmington applauded her smile. Creditors applauded her interest payments. Beneath the filters and poses, money flowed out faster than it trickled in. My parents whispered about it sometimes when they forgot I could hear voices tight behind closed doors. She is behind on rent again. The landlord called twice. I can cover it this month, but she needs to learn. Yet lessons were never actually delivered. A parent paying bills quietly teaches one thing: irresponsibility works as long as admiration remains intact. Payday loans appeared next, disguised as opportunity, but desperation has a scent and it clings even to those who pretend not to notice. I came home one weekend after a long stint of 12-hour days, only to see my mother hurriedly sliding an envelope into her purse when I walked into the kitchen. Madison breezed in behind her wearing fitness leggings and sunglasses on her head, despite being indoors. She smiled like nothing in the world could touch her. I leaned against the counter. Morning, late night, last night. She stretched dramatically. Charity gala. You should come to one sometime. It would soften you up. I did not rise to it. Coffee. She poured a cup, nails tapping the mug as she lifted it. You always look so serious, Avery. It must be exhausting pretending you do not care about anything other than rank and rules. I met her gaze steady. Caring is easy. Sustaining discipline takes more effort. Her smile faltered for a second, irritation showing. You think you are better than everyone just because you wear boots and talk like a drill sergeant. The sentence came out dressed in humor, but jealousy clung to it like humidity in July. I did not flinch. I do not think I am better, Madison. I think I am responsible. She scoffed, flipping her hair. Please. You just like control. I held her eyes a moment longer before answering. Control is earned, not gifted. The words hit her harder than I intended. Her face tightened, and she walked away, heels clicking too loud like sound could mask insecurity. Over the next months, cracks widened. Madison lost another job this one at a boutique she had expected to run simply by being fashionable. She told my parents it was beneath her anyway. Bills piled, outfit deliveries continued, brunch posts persisted, though the smiles in them stiffened. My father whispered that she had borrowed against a credit card to pay for extensions and a photography session. My mother whispered back that they could not let her fail. They did not whisper to me. They expected my silence too. I did not interfere. The world teaches where parents do not. One afternoon, when I came home on a short weekend leave, I found my mother pacing near the window phone in hand, eyes worried. "Everything all right?" She startled, then forced a smile. "Just busy. Your sister is sorting things out. She will be fine." Madison entered moments later, mascara smudged, attempting a casual tone and failing. "Can you spot me a few hundred for a couple days?" "Just until Friday." I shook my head gently. "It is not my place to rescue you from patterns you created." Her face hardened immediately. "You think you are so righteous. You think just because you wear a uniform and boss soldiers around that you are some hero." I stayed still. Heroes do not need to announce themselves. She stepped closer, voice sharpening. "You left this family. Do not pretend to be above us." "I did not leave. I grew. Growth can feel like abandonment to those who choose to stand still." The sentence struck her silent for a moment. Then she turned away abruptly, muttering, "You always think you are stronger. You always think you are special." "No, I think I am accountable." The difference hung in the room like smoke. Jealousy does not shout truth. It whispers poison. From then on, she oscillated between brittle civility and cold hostility. My presence threatened a narrative she needed, that life rewarded beauty and charm alone. Seeing me walk into a room with quiet confidence, seeing respect shown to me instead of applause to her, pressed against her carefully constructed world. She began turning small slights into imagined insults. "You never compliment me. You never support me. You are never here when I need you." I had been there financially, emotionally until I had not. Her definition of support was not help. It was enabling. Each time I visited, I noticed small signs of collapse, late notices tucked under magazines, packages unopened because returns required money. She did not have conversation that dipped into resentment every time attention shifted away from her. Once during dinner, she snapped at me over nothing at all, voice cracking. "You act like being disciplined makes you superior. It makes you boring." I cut my food, slowly placed the fork down gently, and met her stare. "Discipline is not superiority. It is self-respect." She blinked, eyes glimmering with something that looked like fear disguised as anger. My parents shifted uncomfortably, not wanting to address what was unfolding. When people depend on illusions, truth becomes violence. Over time, the jealousy hardened into hostility, the hostility into something brittle and sharp. The more my life grew steady, the more hers frayed, and the more she searched for someone to blame. I never raised my voice. I never defended with volume. Silence and certainty were my shield, and nothing infuriates the insecure more than calm someone else has earned. That was the state of our family when the birthday dinner invitation came. The stage was already set long before the first cup of coffee ever lifted. The Wilmington Riverwalk always looked like a postcard, especially at dusk. Water rolling, gentle lights strung along the boardwalk, laughter floating from patios where tourists toasted to weekends and anniversaries. It smelled like salt and butter and fresh oysters, the kind of place people chose to show off happiness even when they had to borrow it. My mother's birthday dinner reservation was at one of the higher-end restaurants there. White linen tablecloths, polished wine glasses, a piano inside, playing slow jazz just loud enough to sound expensive. I arrived on time, uniform clean and pressed, only because I came directly from duty hours, not because I wanted to make a statement. Respect travels with you even when you do not ask it to. My parents and Madison were already seated at a long table on the patio, heaters glowing against the winter chill. Madison lifted her champagne flute in greeting smile, already too bright. "There she is," she sang, as though narrating for an audience that did not exist yet. "The hero arrives." My father stood just enough to look polite, then sat again, glancing around as if hoping people noticed. My mother wore pearls and a soft, practiced happiness. I placed a small wrapped box at her place before taking my seat. "Happy birthday, Mom. I'm glad to be here." Madison leaned forward, eyes narrowed in amusement. "Did you bring mission rations as a gift, or socks?" Her friends at the table snickered. She had invited 3 of them, all dressed in coordinated winter outfits like they were posing for a lifestyle blog, each one looking at me like I was a curiosity instead of family. I did not look at them. I looked at my mother, who unwrapped the box, slowly, fingers delicate, not wanting to tear the paper. Inside was a simple silver bracelet engraved with the date she married my father on the inside, and the words still standing. She lifted it, eyes softening just for a moment. "This is lovely. Thank you." Before warmth could settle, Madison clapped once sharp, like a cue. "Aw, nothing says military budget like sentimental jewelry." I lifted my water glass calmly. "A gift does not need a price tag to hold value." Madison waved me off, turning to toast her friends, ignoring my mother completely. "To elegance," she said, raising her glass as though she had invented the concept. The servers poured champagne and conversation sparkled on the surface, while tension simmered underneath like a current just strong enough to pull a person under if they were not careful. I listened quietly, responding when spoken to, watching as plates of seafood towers and steak frites arrived. Madison kept leaning into the spotlight she believed she owned. "I am just exhausted from planning the spring charity gala. The details, the vendors, the press. It is a lot." One of her friends gasped. "You do so much. I am amazed you even have time to breathe." Madison placed a hand dramatically over her heart. "The burden of being seen, right, Avery? At least you do not have to worry about the spotlight." My father chuckled awkwardly, the kind of laugh people make when they do not know how to intervene. I continued cutting my salmon with steady precision. "Peace does not require permission." My mother reached for her wine, checking her lipstick in the reflection of the spoon. "So, Avery," her tone bright, brittle, "are you thinking of transferring to something softer? Smoother, something where you are not shouting orders at men all day?" I swallowed once, slow. Leadership does not require shouting. It requires being steady when others are not. Madison rolled her eyes. "Here she goes with the soldier wisdom. Tell us again how discipline is everything." I did not indulge. I simply looked at her. "You have never understood discipline because you confuse attention with worth." The table fell quiet for half a second, long enough for truth to hit. Madison lifted her chin, smile sharp. "Do not get moral with me just because you know how to stand straight and iron clothes." "You left. You went to the army to escape real life." I placed my fork down gently, letting silence answer for me. People reveal themselves when you refuse to feed their performance. As plates were cleared and dessert menus arrived, Madison stood suddenly, tapping her glass with a fork like she was hosting an award show. "Attention, everyone." My mother's eyes widened, not quite sure what was happening, but not stopping it either. My father leaned back, chin up, as if expecting a speech that would honor him by extension. "We would like to thank our beautiful mother for raising us with grace, strength, and style." She paused dramatically, soaking in imaginary applause. "And we also want to celebrate that some people at this table finally learned how to show up." The spotlight she created turned on me like a flashlight in a dark room. She smiled sweetly. "Look at our captain, everyone. Back from whatever base she keeps hiding at." The table clapped on cue, shallow, confused applause that felt more like a performance than celebration. My mother laughed nervously, patting Madison's arm. "Honey, let's not." Madison raised a finger. "No, really it is special. I mean, not all of us can build real lives. Some of us just follow orders." I could feel eyes on me, waiting, curious, wondering if the calm captain would snap. But composure was not a costume. It was my bloodstream. I raised my glass slightly. "I am glad to be here. My mother looks beautiful. That is what matters." Madison blinked, annoyed that I did not give her drama to feed on. She leaned in, voice low enough only I could hear. "You will never outrank me where it counts." I met her gaze, steady as stone. "I do not compete with illusions." That was the moment the shine in her eyes shifted. Not just jealousy, something darker. A need to win even when no one else was playing. Champagne flowed. Laughter resumed. But something had changed. She had not embarrassed me. She had revealed herself, and when people reveal themselves, consequences follow. She did not know it then, but the stage she set to humiliate me would become the stage she fell on. It began not with screaming, not with slammed doors or dramatic exits. It began with a smile I gave her as dessert arrived, calm and unmoved. A smile that held one truth. I saw her now fully, and when a soldier sees clearly, retaliation does not come fast. It comes precise. Dinner should have ended after dessert. That would have been polite. That would have been family. But families like mine did not end evenings quietly. They escalated them. They sharpened them. They turned them into theater. The server cleared the last plates, the candles flickered, and the night air at the Wilmington Riverwalk cooled enough to make the patio heaters hum louder. People were laughing at nearby tables, couples strolling with hands-laced riverboats drifting by softly. If peace had a backdrop, this was it. And yet, the air around our table tightened a kind of buzzing tension that soldiers learn to feel before things turn. Madison stood again, smoother this time, as if she finally found the moment she had been waiting for. She picked up the metal coffee pot from the warming station behind her. I noticed the server's confused glance, but no one intervened. My parents smiled, expecting another toast in her self-appointed reign of social grace. She cleared her throat dramatically. "Everyone quiet, please." Her voice sliced the ambient chatter at our table. The friends she brought sat straighter, anticipating performance. My mother placed a hand over her heart again, ready to be celebrated. My father smoothed his napkin like he was about to be honored by association. Madison looked at me with a gleam that was not just jealousy. Now it was triumph, sharpened by resentment. "So since we are all here, I think it is time to address the truth." The table stilled. Even the piano music inside seemed to dim. She held the coffee pot like a prop, in a play-warm metal glinting under the patio lights. "The truth is, Avery may pretend to be the strong one, but she ran away. She left this family. She chose uniforms and orders over us. We built a life here while she hid behind rank." My mother blinked. My father leaned forward, unsure whether to smile or frown. My jaw stayed relaxed. Silence can be armor when someone expects you to break. Madison lifted the pot a little higher, hands steady in a way that disturbed more than impressed. "So, here's your moment, Avery. Be part of us or walk away for good." I looked at her calmly. "I'm already part of something real." That was enough. Her expression snapped. She moved without hesitation. Hot coffee arced through the air and crashed across my shoulder, collarbone, and neck. It hit with heat so sharp it stunned first pain, arriving a heartbeat later like fire chasing gasoline. The shock made the moment feel soundless before noise rushed in, gasps, silverware clattering, someone shouting, "Oh my God!" The scald burned fast, skin screaming without sound, breath stolen for a second. The smell of roasted beans and melting sugar mixed with the sharp burn of flesh. I inhaled through my nose, one measured breath steady like combat drills. Madison lowered the pot slowly, almost reverently, as if finishing a ceremony she had rehearsed. Her eyes glittered with victory. 15 minutes. Her voice was quiet, deadly. "You have 15 minutes to leave this family forever. You don't belong here." A murmur rippled through nearby tables. Phones lifted, screens glowed. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" My parents did not stand. They did not reach for me. They did not gasp in horror. My father gave a single approving nod, like discipline had just been served. My mother exhaled in a way that almost passed for relief. My aunt, who had always adored Madison's charm, began to clap softly. The others joined palms, tapping like a congratulatory send-off. A public execution disguised as family tradition. The burn pulsed harder now, stinging, blistering under the fabric of my shirt. The heat crawled across my skin like it wanted to rewrite who I was. I did not touch it. I did not flinch. I had survived worse pain. Pain is information, not defeat. I blinked once slow and met Madison's stare. Timer started. The table froze. No yelling, no outrage, no retaliation. Just calm. Tactical calm. The kind that frightened soldiers more than shouting ever could. Someone at another table gasped. Someone else whispered, She didn't even raise her voice. Madison expected tears drama begging her currency. She did not know what to do with composure. Her smirk faltered. My mother finally stood hesitant. Avery, don't make a scene. It was the plea of someone who thought decorum mattered more than cruelty. I rose slowly, chair legs scraping quietly against concrete, my spine straight, breath steady. I am not making a scene. The scene already happened. I picked up my coat, ignored the heat searing against the fabric as it brushed my skin. A waiter moved toward me, face horrified. "Ma'am, do you need?" I nodded once. "I will go to Womack." He knew what that meant. A soldier saying I will get treated on base, not here, not among witnesses who applauded harm. My parents watched with interest, not concern. Pride in the wrong child often looks like indifference to the right one. As I turned to leave, Madison hissed just loud enough for me to hear, "Don't come back." I paused, looked at her with a gaze steady enough to hold an entire room. "I won't need to." Then I walked, not hurried, not shaken. Each step precise, ground solid under my boots, just as it had been overseas. Pain crawled up my neck. Sweat prickled, vision sharpened instead of blurring. People parted as I passed. Silence stretched like a salute. At the edge of the patio, I glanced back once. Madison stood with champagne in hand, trying to reclaim her stage. But the room had shifted. Phones were still recording. Strangers stared in disbelief, not admiration. She had not won. She had revealed. I walked along the river toward my car, lights dancing on the water, wind cool against the burn breath measured. In combat, sometimes retreat isn't defeat, it's repositioning. Sometimes the quietest exit is the first strike. I unlocked my car, slid in, and exhaled. Then I whispered, not in anger, but in oath. "You started the clock. I will finish it." The engine hummed, headlights cut through the darkness, and I drove toward the base hospital. Pain seated itself on my shoulder like a weight, but resolve sat heavier and steadier. Betrayal is loud when it happens. Justice is quieter when it arrives, and mine had already begun. What would you have done in my place? Comment one word. Stay or leave. The fluorescent lights of Womack felt honest and small as I lay back on the narrow hospital bed with my uniform folded on a chair and a pale sheet pulled to my knees. The nurse moved with quick professional hands, cooling packs replacing warm compresses, antiseptic smelling clean and sharp. The doctor examined my shoulder with gloved fingers, gentle and practiced. "Burn is treated like an injury and like a map," he said, tracing edges as if reading contours rather than gossip. Pain arrived in waves but did not break my control. They cleaned the area, applied topical medication, wrapped non-stick gauze, and set an IV for fluids and morphine. The morphine came in a tidy syringe offered to keep the body calm so the mind could plan. I accepted because function mattered more than dramatic endurance. Sergeant Cole Ramirez sat in the chair beside the door hat in his hands, though he did not wear one in this room. Cole had been steady through more than one rotation, a soldier whose silence often offered better counsel than words. He did not look at me like a victim. He looked like a colleague wronged. "You warned them," he said quietly, voice flat with concern and anger I trusted. "They crossed into felony assault," he added, "because smearing hot liquid on someone as a public act is not an accident." I watched his jaw move as he said it. "Law is a language I know. So is consequence." I let the nurses do their work while Cole updated me on practicalities. "Someone will file the civilian police report and we can escalate to post-investigation if needed," he said. "You have options. We can do it quietly or make sure it is on record. Choices become a kind of power." The nurse adjusted my morphine drip and asked if the pain was manageable. It was because I would not let sedation wipe out clarity. When family applauds harm, you cannot unhear it. A dozen phones had recorded the act. Each loop made proof and gossip at once. Cole placed his hand on the back of a chair and said, "We will document everything, your testimony, the video witness statements, the medical record. It will all be available." The words felt less like threat than promise. I owed those who trusted me a response that matched the precision they expected. When the doctor stepped out to consult a burn clinic specialist, Cole leaned closer. "Do you want me to speak to them now or wait for your direction?" He understood chain of command applied in personal matters too. I inhaled slow, let the morphine dull the edge for clarity. Not now, I said. I will decide the path. I do not strike. I dismantle. Cole nodded like he had been waiting. There are ways to take down a structure without burning the house around it, I explained. The plan will be methodical, documented, clean. He offered a small acknowledgement, a smile that held both gravity and faith. Visitors came in the evening, fellow MPs, dropping off sandwiches and procedural checklists, colleagues who treated me with the same care they give an injured comrade. My commanding officer messaged support, and legal counsel offered initial guidance on preserving evidence. We made lists together, small bullets that felt like careful strategy rather than theatrics. Document medical records. Save the video. Get witness statements. Preserve the coffee pot if possible. Do not speak rashly. Do not accept pushback as truth. The nurse changed dressings while I watched her hands move, thinking how small actions could repair. The pain was real, and so was the wrong done to me. Both required acknowledgement. I let morphine drag the sting into a dull throb and turned thoughts toward logistics instead of fury. Cole spoke to the duty desk, and within the hour, a statement packet arrived and an officer from Provost's came to take a preliminary account. He asked for dates, times, descriptions. I recounted the warmth hitting my shoulder, the words that followed, the room filling with applause. The room filled with paper 2 signatures and stamps marking facts oddly ceremonial for justice. At some point, my mother called my cell. I let it ring. Later, there was a voicemail voice light apologetic in a way that suggested concern for perception more than person. I saved it. Everything counts. The night passed in fragments, tests, dressing changes, a chaplain who sat to listen rather than lecture a fellow captain with a thermos of coffee I did not touch. At dawn, a burn nurse evaluated infection risk and outpatient follow-up. Recovery, they said, is a process, not an event. The word fit, not drama, but procedure. Between visits, Cole said, "You are not alone in this. Not anymore." I let that truth take root. There was a team process, law, and work to do. The burn sat on my shoulder, but the wound in trust ran deeper and would need more than bandages. It would require choices, records, and quiet patience. When Cole left, he squeezed my hand, then straightened, pausing at the door to say, "We move when you say." I replied, "Then move." An investigator called with steps for chain of custody. Photographs needed timestamps, witness statements required signatures, and items like the coffee pot and napkins should be preserved for evidence. Cole arranged for secure pickup so those objects could be processed. It felt strange to treat leftovers as proof until you understand that mundane things become the most telling evidence when people deny their actions. The legal advisor suggested a temporary protective order and immediate notification to civilian authorities to ensure the assault was on record. Small bureaucratic moves can feel clinical, but they build an unassailable case. I watched morning light spill over paperwork and knew clarity would win where theatrics had failed. Cole waited until I signed the forms, then left steady and ready to act on my command. Then move. When people think of revenge, they imagine shouting door slams rage unleashed like a wildfire. But soldiers know better. The most effective operations are silent, deliberate, and rooted in truth. A house does not collapse from one strike. It collapses because its foundation has been ignored long enough that one precise touch sends everything down. I left the hospital with my shoulder-bandaged burn cream tucked into my bag and medical records sealed and time-stamped. The air outside felt crisp pine, scented early morning quiet, and the world looked unchanged, even though mine had crossed a line. I drove back to base housing, sat at my dining table, and opened my laptop. Revenge was not emotional for me. It was clerical. First, I filed the police report with Wilmington PD, attaching medical documentation, photos, timestamps, witness names, and links to videos already spreading online. Assault with scalding liquid in a public space. Intent, deliberate harm. Next, I filed a domestic violence report under North Carolina's Family Violence Prevention Act. Family violence applies to siblings. People forget that. The form did not ask for emotion. It asked for facts and proof. I had both. Then came the emergency protective order request, calm and precise. I am not afraid of her, but protection orders are not about fear. They are about establishing boundaries in the legal record. By the time the morning sun rose high enough to hit the blinds, my restraining order request sat queued for review. My assault report filed, and 3 case numbers sat in my inbox like quiet declarations. From there, I shifted to my secure folder. Information I gathered long before coffee met skin, because while Madison believed in emotional theatrics, I believed in preparedness. Months earlier, when my parents came to me, soft-voiced and hopeful, they had asked if I could help Madison temporarily. She is struggling a little, they said, glossing over late notices and credit cards maxed to their limits. Just until she finds her footing. They assumed I would hand cash over because I always stepped in quietly before. I said I would consider helping if I understood the financial landscape. They agreed, thinking transparency would unlock funds. What they handed me instead was an open window into a crumbling empire. I reviewed everything then quietly. Debt consolidation plans rejected for insufficient income. Payday loans rolled over with compounding interest. Credit card statements showing luxury spending on borrowed time. And then I found something deeper. A strange insurance reimbursement claim tied to cosmetic procedures labeled as medical necessity. A doctor's signature that did not match any practicing physician in the state registry. Fraud hides behind glamour sometimes. I secured copies, collected statements, requested verifications through channels most people did not know how to navigate. I waited because revenge works best when timing matches truth. Among the files was a past due notice from a rental property management company. My parents had been covering rent to protect Madison's reputation. In their desperation to keep her performing in the spotlight, they tied personal accounts to her obligations. One of the accounts, a joint credit agreement, was under their names with her as authorized user. And when payments lapsed, they reached out for help again. I did not hand them money. I offered a different solution. Let me purchase the debt. They accepted without seeing that decision as anything but rescue. They signed, ignorance disguised as relief. I acquired the lien and collateral rights through official assignment quietly, legally, ethically. They thought it was generosity. It was structure. And structure has consequences. With the police report filed and the protective order submitted, I opened the lien file. It was time to accelerate terms. Payment due in full. Cure period expired. Collateral review initiated. I drafted the notice attached supporting documents, notified the county clerk and debt servicer, then scheduled a certified courier. Facts do not need emotion. They only need proper routing. I then drafted a mandatory fraud notification to the State Insurance Bureau, attaching the questionable reimbursement info and requesting a professional investigation. I did not accuse. I presented evidence. People often confuse vengeance with malice. Mine was neither. It was accountability wearing paperwork. Next, I emailed a financial compliance contact at a regional bank. We had crossed paths during a base law enforcement seminar last year. Subject line, potential misuse of joint credit line beneficiary fraud risk, clipped attachments, timestamps, chain of custody for digital evidence. I ended the email with one sentence. I am submitting this as both a private citizen and an officer obligated to uphold lawful conduct. Those words matter in systems that respect rank and evidence more than personal narrative. The thought of Madison reading the eventual notices did not bring satisfaction. It brought symmetry. She had used performance as a weapon. I used documentation. Lunch hour came and went unnoticed. My bandage tugged slightly when I moved a reminder, not of pain, but of the precise moment a line in our family rewrote itself. I called Sergeant Cole to update him on steps taken. He listened without interrupting, then said, "You're not reacting. You're executing." I replied, "Reaction is emotion. Execution is discipline." He exhaled quietly the way soldiers do when they recognize strategy unfolding. Someone from base legal called shortly after confirming receipt of my documentation and affirming my right to proceed independently or with support. I chose support, not because I needed backup, but because public accountability carries more weight when formal institutions stand behind it. Then came the most delicate step. I opened a private browser window and typed a single keyword into the search bar. The video had spread. Comments flooded beneath it. Is that her sister? Why did no one help her? That is assault. That is sick. Others surfaced clips from the dinner showing Madison's smirk before she lifted the pot, showing my parents' approving posture. Public perception is not justice, but it is wind. and windy days topple rotting trees faster. I saved the footage in 2 secure drives and uploaded a copy to my legal evidence folder with metadata logs. I did not post. I did not comment. I simply preserved. Then a message buzzed on my phone. Unknown number. You're blowing this out of proportion. Call us. We need to talk before things get out of hand. Madison. I did not respond. Silence holds power. A second message followed. You think your army friends can protect you from consequences? You always needed authority to feel big. I looked at those lines, then archived them. Threats disguised as pride become evidence, too. The burn on my shoulder pulsed once, then eased under the cool pack. Pain had stopped feeling personal. It felt like data now. The clock she had started at the restaurant had run long past 15 minutes. She thought she gave me a deadline. She had given me jurisdiction. Vengeance is not spite. It is truth meeting daylight. By evening, everything was in motion. Legal, financial, ethical, structural. I stood at my kitchen sink, watching dusk fall over base housing streetlights humming to life. I had not shouted once. I had not lifted a hand. Revenge is not a storm. It is architecture. You dismantle a house by removing the beams that let it stand. And their house, built on vanity, entitlement, and applause, had always been hollow. I just removed the illusion holding up the roof. Courtrooms are not built for drama no matter what television suggests. They are built for order. Wood benches, neutral walls, fluorescent lights humming at a steady pitch, a place where voices do not need to rise because documents do the speaking. The hearing was scheduled early docket set for protective orders, domestic cases, preliminary reviews. I wore a pressed suit instead of uniform, not to hide rank, but to meet the moment as Avery, the citizen, not Captain the authority. Cole sat 2 rows back in quiet support posture, straight eyes forward. When the clerk called my name, I stepped forward clean and controlled. Madison and my parents sat at the opposite table. Madison wore a white dress, symbolic, perhaps hoping innocence could be draped like fabric. My parents looked polished, as if social presentation might still operate as shield. But cosmetics could not cover fear that had begun to creep into their expressions. The judge reviewed the filings: assault report, medical records, photos of burns, statements from restaurant patrons, cell phone footage submitted as evidence. The sound filled the courtroom speakers when the bailiff pressed play. Laughter, clinking silverware, casual chatter until coffee poured and the room gasped. Madison's voice rang loud. You have 15 minutes to leave this family forever. Then applause. When the video cut, the silence in the courtroom felt heavier than any uniform I ever wore. Madison shot up from her chair. That video is misleading, she blurted. It was a joke. People pour stuff on each other in pranks all the time. Her voice cracked, pitching higher, desperate for an audience. The judge held up one hand. Sit. Her parents avoided looking at me. They looked instead at the floor, shoulders tight, waiting for sympathy that did not arrive. The judge flipped pages, eyes scanning across documentation like reading a map of truth. You understand this constitutes intentional assault with scalding liquid. He said it flatly, like gravity, not accusation. Madison opened her mouth, then shut it again, panic twitching at her jawline. My attorney assigned pro bono through base legal partnerships stood calm beside me. Your Honor, we also submitted financial disclosures relevant to lien ownership and pending debt enforcement. The judge read, tapped the papers, lifted his eyes. So, the petitioner legally acquired the outstanding debt owed by the respondent's parents months ago and filed proper notice of acceleration. He turned toward my parents for the first time. Did you understand what you signed? They looked stunned, like children realizing rules applied even when they pretended otherwise. My father cleared his throat. We did not realize. The judge cut him off. Ignorance does not void signatures. He continued down the list. Confirmed the pending state insurance inquiry. Confirmed the tax review. Confirmed the credit freeze due to suspected fraud. Each sentence landed like a quiet hammer. When authority speaks softly, consequences roar. My mother whispered, barely audible, How did she? Madison slammed her palm against the table. She tricked us. She set us up. This is malicious. I met her eyes with the same calm I learned in conflict resolution briefings. I did not set you up. I documented what already existed. The judge tapped his pen once on the bench, the auditory equivalent of a gavel without force. Ms. Grant, he said to Madison, you publicly assaulted your sibling in front of numerous witnesses. The digital evidence is overwhelming. The restaurant's CCTV shows intent. He motioned to the bailiff, who produced an additional recording angle security footage showing Madison lifting the pot slowly with deliberation. There was no spontaneity, no panic, just cold execution. The judge continued, tone even. Protective order granted for 1 year. No contact, no approach. Violations will result in arrest. Gasps in the room, whispers rising then falling instantly when the judge lifted a hand again. As for financial matters, he turned to my parents. Your co-signed obligations and the lien transfer are binding. Garnishment authorization approved. Wage withholding to be executed. They blinked like someone had opened windows in a storm. The judge was not finished. Credit restrictions remain while state investigation proceeds. Travel restrictions may be recommended pending review of insurance documentation. He paused long enough for breathing to return to the room. Ms. Grant, he said, shifting back to Madison, social harm is not legal harm, but your public conduct and recorded statements will likely affect ongoing civil matters. She swallowed, trying to stand straighter, fighting panic like a drowning swimmer reaching for air that does not exist. You are ruining my life, she hissed. I stayed still. No, you did that. I just stopped covering it. The judge gave me a brief nod acknowledgement, not sympathy. This court upholds accountability, not emotion. As he closed the folder, he delivered one more line. Honor is not inherited. It is earned. That sentence did more than impose consequence. It stripped privilege from entitlement. After adjournment, as we filed into the hallway, whispers followed my family like shadows. Church members from our hometown congregation stood near the doors. Wilmington is a place where news travels like tidewater, persistent, unstoppable. One woman I recognized from childhood approached timidly. Avery, honey, we did not know. She squeezed my hand, eyes, soft voice, quiet with respect and shame for ever believing the facade. Behind her, heads shook as my parents passed, their social armor cracking in real time. Reputation mattered more to them than truth ever had. Watching it buckle did not give pleasure, but it gave closure. Madison tried to push through the crowd, tears streaking her makeup. You ruined me. You ruined us. I looked at her, steady as ever. You poured the coffee. You drew the line. I enforced it. She reached out as if to grab my arm, but the bailiff stepped forward and raised a hand. Court order. No contact. The moment froze, then shattered. My parents hurried her out of the building like salvaging belongings from a sinking ship. Cole stepped beside me silently. He did not say good job. He did not congratulate. He simply nodded once. Mission accomplished. That is how soldiers acknowledge victory without celebrating pain. As I left the courthouse, sunlight warmed the bandaged skin on my shoulder. Justice did not feel loud. It felt clean. A local reporter near the steps called my name. Microphone lifted. Captain Grant, do you have anything to say about today's ruling? I paused, looked forward, voice level. Accountability protects families, even when it hurts. Then I walked away, not because I wanted distance, but because distance was already truth. The river in Wilmington moved the same way it always had, slow and steady toward the ocean, indifferent to pride or fall. And somewhere behind me, the life my sister built on applause crumbled into the quiet reality she had always feared. When the music stopped, she stood alone. Choices have weight, and every one of hers just landed. Peace is not loud. It does not arrive in applause or headlines or dramatic final acts. It slips in quietly after the dust settles, after the last email is archived, after the courthouse doors close, and no one is left to perform outrage or righteousness. It feels like a clean dawn, a steady inhale, a weight unclenched from the spine. A month after the court ruling, I signed papers on a small coastal cabin near Topsail Beach. Not extravagant, not grand. A single-story, cedar-sided home tucked behind dunes and sea oats, quiet enough that you could hear the ocean before you saw it. The first morning there, I woke before sunrise out of habit, not alarm. I padded barefoot across cool hardwood floors, opened the screen door, and stepped onto the small deck facing the Atlantic. The horizon was a muted gray line, softening into gold waves, folding gently against the sand gulls cutting clean arcs in the sky. I wrapped a light blanket around my shoulders and just breathed. Salt, quiet, space. No eyes judging how I sat or what I wore or whether I smiled on cue. No one to impress. No one to protect from their own ego. Just water and wind and truth. Soldiers learn early that safety is not silence. It is vigilance without chaos. Here, vigilance felt like peace, not threat. I ran again, something I had done overseas for survival and on base for discipline. But here, it felt like release. My route traced a sandy trail through seagrass, small wildflowers dotting the edges, then curved toward the shoreline. Sand under boots had always meant deployment, but sand under running shoes meant home. I ran until my breath found rhythm, until sweat cooled along my jawline, until my legs hummed with effort, but not anxiety. Each day, I added distance not to chase an achievement, but to let old tension burn through muscle and leave clean space behind. Healing like mission prep thrives in routine. On Wednesdays, I met with the chaplain I had known on base, a man who understood that faith and discipline could sit side by side without conflict. We sat under the pier, sometimes waves rolling beneath us, gulls calling overhead. He never asked me to explain my pain. He asked only what truth I learned from it. Honor does not always defend you, I told him once. You sometimes defend it. He nodded slowly. Honor is not a shield you hold. It is a standard you stand beside, even when no one watches. Some days we talked about forgiveness. He never pressured, it never romanticized it. Forgiveness is not permission, he said. It is release. I carried that with me like a pocket prayer. Not religious, but grounding. On base, reputation always mattered because lives depended on trust. Off-base, social reputation often masked insecurity and illusion. My new community of waves and weather did not care who I was before. I was simply the woman who jogged at dawn, who swept her deck at sundown, who smiled at neighbors walking dogs, and nodded to fishermen casting lines at sunrise. On Sundays, I volunteered at a veteran support circle in Jacksonville, a women-only group where ranks blurred and stories surfaced with caution and courage. We spoke of deployments and reintegration of invisible scars and visible ones. Some carried grief like a rucksack. Some carried anger like a splint. Some carried numbness so deep it felt like steel plating under the ribs. I listened more than I spoke. When I did speak, I talked about dignity, about leaving places you cannot grow in, about how survival sometimes looks like silence rather than fight. They nodded because pain speaks a language soldiers learn fluently. Healing did not mean forgetting. It meant building something better in the space where hurt once stood. I planted seagrass near my porch, built shelves for my books, replaced one loose board on the deck each week until the whole thing sat level. Construction had always been my father's pride, yet here I rebuilt with my own hands, quietly board by board, life by life. Some days I thought about calling, old habit, old longing. But I did not mistake longing for loyalty. They had chosen shame over reflection, image over truth, performance over relationship. Online Madison resurfaced like a tide that refused to recede. Posts filtered through mutual acquaintances. Her captions sharp at first, then frantic, then pleading. First came denial. My sister overreacted. She destroyed our family for attention. Then came excuses. We were joking. People are too sensitive now. Then desperation. Nothing hurts like family betrayal. Pray for us. A photo appeared one day, her sitting in a sparsely furnished apartment, makeup, softer eyes, tired. Comments flooded beneath it, some sympathetic, others blunt with truth. One read, "You did this to yourself." She replied, "You don't understand. Trauma makes people do things." I closed the app, not because I felt anger, but because watching someone rewrite history is like watching someone cling to a burning rope. They cannot let go without admitting they set the fire. Weeks passed and her tone shifted again. A private message arrived in my inbox. "Avery, please. I need help. I didn't mean to hurt you. We're family." Family! That word used to feel like obligation. Now it felt like a choice, and I had already chosen. I read the message. I did not reply. Forgiveness had already happened in the quiet hours between ocean breaths and chapel benches. But forgiveness does not mandate access. Silence is not punishment when it is boundary. My parents tried too. A card arrived once. Script handwriting. We love you. We miss you. Let's start fresh. I placed it in a drawer unopened. Love without accountability is sentiment, not stability. One afternoon, months into my new life, I sat on the beach after a run, sand cool beneath me, wind soft. Waves kept rolling in, steady as breath. A group of Marines jogged past in cadence voices low and rhythmic. I watched them, not longing to be back, not relieved to be gone, just steady. Service was a chapter, not my identity's prison. I still lived by discipline, but peace had arrived beside it, not behind it. A neighbor approached one evening while I watered dune grass. Older womankind eyes, sun-touched skin. You carry yourself like someone who came through a storm and learned to plant gardens after she said. It was the nicest thing anyone had ever said to me. Plants grow where they are tended, not where they are inherited. I tended myself. Slowly, deliberately, without spectators. The burn healed into a pale crescent on my shoulder, a reminder not of pain, but of release. When the ocean was calm, I swam at sunrise. When clouds gathered, I sat inside and read books on leadership, on psychology, on grace. When Friday evenings felt slow, I baked bread and invited one neighbor at a time for dinner, small circles instead of large stages. Life became specific instead of performative. And on one quiet morning, while walking barefoot along wet sand, watching pelicans dive and surface, I realized something simple and profound. I was not healing to prove anything. I was healing because I deserved a life free from forced loyalty and conditional affection. True peace comes when you no longer perform pain or strength for others. You simply live. Do I think they ever fully understood what happened? No. People accustomed to applause rarely examine the stage unless the lights go out. Do I hate them? No. Hate binds. I do not bind myself to things that destroyed themselves. Do I forgive them? Yes. Forgiveness is freedom, not reunion. Forgiveness is closure, not invitation. Family is not blood. Family is respect. Family is chosen and kept by behavior, not birthright. As the tide rolled in and drew smooth lines in the sand at my feet, I whispered the truth that anchored my new life. Forgiveness isn't access. I forgive you, but you stay out. There is a moment in every life where you stop asking who should have protected you, and you start asking who you choose to be when they don't. Some people are born into steady love. Some earn it, and some have to walk through fire to understand that self-respect is not selfish. And boundaries are not betrayal, they are survival. If you listened to my story all the way here, then maybe you know a little bit about that journey too. Maybe you have stood in a room full of people who shared your last name, but not your loyalty. Maybe you've been the quiet one, the strong one, the one they leaned on until the day you refused to bend. Maybe you've learned the hard way that peace sometimes looks like a closed door and a life rebuilt without applause. Healing is not dramatic. It's choosing yourself in small moments, choosing stillness over chaos, honor over expectation, boundaries over guilt. It's learning that love is not proven by how much pain you can carry, but by how much truth you allow into your life. And if anyone ever made you feel like walking away made you cold, let this be your reminder. Walking away is how some hearts survive. You can forgive without returning. You can love people from afar. You can pray for someone and still protect your peace. Your life does not have to shrink to keep someone else comfortable. You do not have to bleed to prove you care. Dignity is not negotiable. And when blood is cruel, dignity becomes the only family you owe allegiance to. If you watched my story and felt that ache in your chest, in your memory, in that place where loyalty met pain, know this: you are not alone and you are not wrong for choosing yourself. The world may applaud loud voices and grand gestures, but quiet strength builds real futures. And sometimes the bravest thing you will ever do is simply walk forward and refuse to look back. If you believe dignity beats blood when blood is cruel, type respect in the comments. and tell me where you're watching from. I read every one.